Lots going on, and even though college basketball is over, the portal, of course, for everybody because if this season taught me anything, is that, man, I won't know who's going to be what until the season is in play next year. Predicting teams is getting more and more difficult because not only do they change so much in between seasons, but they changed during the season. Miami is a team that played well, this year, but I don't know how many people expected them to be, go as far as they did. But just FAU is another great example. San Diego State. It's just predicting these teams is getting more and more difficult.
Yeah, and even all the focus on the portal and people immediately go to rankings in the portal and this guy and that guy. I mean, it doesn't mean it'll continue to be this way, but a lot of the portal guys who were big contributors on teams that got to the Final Four, if it would have been a year ago and you would have said Indiana's looking at Damian Trammell of Seattle to play guard, Indiana fans would have, what's wrong? What, can't they recruit the big names? And what's going on here? And, exactly. And it's really hard to project who's good and who isn't good and how they fit into what you're trying to do and how motivated they are and all those different things. I mean, none of those San Diego State guys, I don't think they had a single top 100 recruit on their team. Not one. And I know that Florida Atlantic didn't. Miami might have had a couple, Wong and maybe one other guy. And obviously UConn did, and they won. And they should have won. They were the more talented team. What I don't understand about UConn is how they lost 8 games, seven in conference play. I mean, they finished 4th in their league.
Now, they did play in a kind of – the Big East was – you had Creighton and Xavier and who am I missing? Marquette, of
Providence,
course. So,
wasn't bad.
Yeah, but that's what Charles Barkley said. I want to know who the hell beat them 8 times. But they were playing so well at the end of the year too, though. In New York, I saw them play, and then it's like, wow, UConn was just looking good. They were looking tournament ready. They were peaking, playing together, and well coached. Hurley had them focused, man, and they were playing together, playing to win. That's the greatest importance of getting guys that, like you said, to meet the fit, but are playing to win every time and knowing how to play to win every game, not taking games off.
Well, I mean, they had what you need to be a really good team these days, and you saw it. Like you were there in Albany, as you said, and so was I. They could play fast. They could play slower. They could make threes, but they also had an inside game. They had depth. They had athleticism. They had height. I mean, they had I'm not saying it was a perfect team. Obviously, it wasn't. They lost 8 games. But they had all the pieces that you want in a really versatile team. And, we were there the first night they played Rick Pitino and Iona. And I remember Iona made their first 4 shots. And I was thinking, this could be one of those games Pitino worked some of his magic. But you know what? Connecticut made like 5 of their first 6 shots and got the message. So I was like, you're not beating us. And what I was struck by was how fast they got the ball down court and scored. I mean, they looked like a team that was playing a different kind of basketball than everybody else. Because if you turned it over or you took a bad shot, they turned it into a basket immediately. And that's what good teams do. And they kept it up in the whole tournament. And, the way they beat Gonzaga was another telltale sign to me that this team is different than everybody else.
Yeah, beat snot out of them. Ed pointing out Connecticut wasn't even ranked at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
that just shows you. I mean, especially now again with the change, Indiana is going to be a completely different team next year. You've got Indiana's 7 new faces.
They're not going to show up in any of these 2 early top 25s. They're not, because people know that Jackson.
There's no way.
And Hood Schifino and Race and Miller Copper gone, and among with Bates and Geronimo and Duncombe. So we don't even know what the team's going to be. I mean, I would be surprised. There'll be a minimum of 2 and maybe as many as 3, could be 4 guys out of the portal starting for IU next year. Right?
Oh, I sent out a tweet along 2 weeks ago that said a minimum of 3, possibly 4 starters will be new on this team next year.
Yeah.
Galloway will probably start because Mike has shown he likes to go with his experience, expecting Xavier to be there. But that's not a given. If let's say they actually landed Caleb Love, is he going to come off the bench? I don't know about that, but him and X are very similar players too, so I don't know. That's not for me.
Galloway. Galloway's a fine player. He has some great games, but until Galloway shows that he can consistently be an offensive player and make shots, you're not going to win at a high level on the national scene with guys like that. You have to have guys in the perimeter who can make shots. You have to have them.
Yeah, he's a 2 guard that's a facilitator. And that's not what a 2 guard's position is. Yeah. You already have a point guard.
I mean, he's going to have to improve his game. I mean, it's the exception rather than the rule, but Victor Oladipo improved his game. Will Sheehy improved his game a little bit. It's up to Trey Galloway. I mean, I think he can be a really good player because he can defend, he can handle the ball, he's an energy guy, he does a lot of good things. But that's really a pretty important void in his game that he's going to have to fill to be. You can be a starter at Indiana. You can be a guy who's on a team that wins. But to really be an impact player, if you can't shoot the ball, you're not going to be an impact player.
Which makes it all the more just head-scratching on how Trace Jackson-Davis did not do that over the last 4, 3, 2, 1 years. None of them. It's like, dude, you cannot. I just don't see him really successfully being able to play at the NBA without having some kind of shot. There's just no way. There's too many guys that can just run him out of the paint.
Well, compare him to Sonogo, and they're not exactly the same player, but Sonogo is a 6'8" post player who's a little bit more muscular, but he was comfortable going out on the perimeter and shooting threes, and he made some. And you have that's the thing. I agree with you. I never did understand with Jackson Davis. He improved as a free throw shooter, and when he was at the line, it wasn't like he was a 50% guy. I mean, he was around high 60s to low 70s, somewhere in that range. I mean, he's a better shooter in my mind than Race Thompson, and Race Thompson never had a hesitation about taking threes, but Trace just would never do it. It was puzzling.
He would hardly take a 12-footer. I mean, it was but that's another story. Peyton Sparks, now I don't know, of course I don't know much about him. I know he's a ferocious rebounder. I don't know about him offensively, if he has a 10-foot jump shot, if he has any of that. But I don't know also if Indiana's looking more for just having the 4 guys around him or someone like that can score the ball, shoot the ball. Trey Galloway, if he's going to be in there, has to be one of those guys that is scoring. He shot 50% from 3-point this year, but he didn't put up the numbers, the attempts that he should have, has to from that position, as you pointed out. So that's why, I think there could be 3 or 4 new starters next year to go along with Xavier. Peyton Sparks, I don't know if he's going to be one of those or not. Malik, I don't know if he's ready for a starting role. I don't know if he hit a wall because he was pretty decent player, but still he has to get past the fouling, the picking up those quick fouls, and things like that. But it'll be interesting to see the change he makes.
You had Tom Crean on earlier in the week, and I default back. There was ups and downs with Tom Crean. I mean, it was time for Indiana to make a change for a lot of reasons. But one thing you can consistently say about Tom Crean on offense, he had dudes that can make those shots, whether it was Zeisloff, Blackman, Robert Johnson, Yogi Ferrell, Victor Oladipo, Verdell Jones, Matt Roth. I mean, he had a lot of dudes that could make threes, and Troy
Christian
Williams,
Watford.
Christian Watford, Troy Williams became a decent 3-point shooter. Maurice Creek, before he got hurt, was a 3-point shooter. And we can name a bunch. Jordy Hulls, I forgot about him. I mean, they had Will Sheehy at times could make them. I mean, they had guys who would take and could make 3-point shots. Offensively, they were much more difficult to guard in those days. And I think that the most concerning thing about IU to me this last season was shooting 3-point shots was not, I wouldn't say it was come close to being a priority. It was almost like it was
a negative.
What were they, like 350 and 3-point shot attempted? I mean, that's
I think the last I saw they were like in the top 16 of percentage made, right, and the lowest 16 of the shots attempted, something like that.
Yeah, and I don't think in March you're going to win that way. That's still playing basketball from a different generation, and it's not played that way anymore.
Well, Penn State showed it to them. I mean, Penn State was beating them 3-2. They lost games. Northwestern beat them 3-2, right, basically. I mean, Iowa crushed them 3-2.
Indiana's point distribution, they got less than 23% of their points on 3-pointers. That ranked 345th out of 363 teams in the nation. Their 3-point shooting percentage was almost 37%, which was top 40. So you got to get a little bit more in the middle. Your percentage might go down a little bit, but you got to be more comfortable. And I know they had a great post player, with one of the best in the nation, in Trace Jackson Davis, but you got to embrace a little bit more of the modern style of basketball and have more guys who are confident and feel empowered to take threes. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. And you know that Mike Woodson is not dissuading anybody, because he was always saying, "Oh, I'm fine with Race taking those," even though most everybody else was not. Right. But so he's fine with it. I don't know if it's just a complete lack of confidence in Trey, but you got to put Miller Kopp in this category too, because he also had a high percentage, but didn't take as many. He took a few, but there's one he'd probably like to have back, is that leaner he took against in the tournament. I mean, I don't know what the hell that was.
They took the lead. Yeah.
Yeah. But
did you listen to his podcast with Christian Watford and Derek Elson?
No, I haven't heard it yet.
He kind of implies in that one that they didn't run many plays for him to get threes. He kind of implies that he kind of got shots whenever there were shots to be gotten, but it wasn't like a priority for them to run many plays for him to get. I believe that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's part of a growth pattern of any coach. I mean, this is year 3 for Mike Woodson. He's an NBA lifer who's coming into the college game, and it's played different. He had an All-American center. He maximized him. He made him better. He's going to be a higher draft pick than he would have been a couple of years ago. But now it's time to change and adjust. And we'll really see what he wants to do as he puts this roster together. And it's not going to be easy, because he's going to be putting it together with transfer portal guys. And as we know, the competition for the really good transfer portal guys is fierce. It's not like some of these high school guys, like we have a top 5. These transfer portal guys, you see their list, they have like a top 20. And you're doing well to get a Zoom call. Then if you get them on campus, you're doing really well. And then that's the moment of truth, because I think for a lot of them, the way they want to know, like, A, how are you going to use me? Because I've only got a year or 2 to play. How am I going to be highlighted? And B, what's my NIL? And so there's a lot of pressure on that staff right now to bring in impactful players.
Well, and not only that, you've got the guys that stayed, because collectives and schools, they can in essence renegotiate the NIL deal directly with the player if they are a returning player. So they can kind of work those deals and keep them happy. But then now you've got to work these deals for all these 7 new players. 7. That's a lot to deal with. That's a lot for the NIL the NIL people to deal with. That's a lot for the coaches to deal with, because not only are you worrying about the actual player and how they fit and all this, now you got this business side that you've got to work out. And that's basically a negotiation, and that there's no giving, because they're also doing the same thing with other schools. So it's making recruiting definitely more difficult. I don't know if it's going to slow it down a whole lot, because one of the guys that IU is looking at, Jalen DeRoche from VCU, he said he hopes to have his visits or any visits and his decision done by into May.
Right.
That's not a long time off. So
he's the kid who's at least committed to making a visit. So that means he's at least serious. If you're going to go to the trouble of traveling from Richmond, Virginia to Bloomington, Indiana, you're at least serious about it. So
yeah,
that's obviously one to keep an eye on. And I saw today on Peegs, they've reported a kid by the name of Dalton. I think it's Knecht, Knecht. He's a 6'6", 3-point shooter. Has agreed to do a Zoom call with IU. So I mean, they're in on some guys. And they just need to get at least 3, I'd say. And I don't know. I mean, the last couple of years they've been fortunate to pick up a decommitment of a high school guy. I don't know. I haven't studied it closely enough to know what the coaching changes we've seen, how many guys have decommitted who would be interested and or available to Indiana. But maybe there's a way to get a guy that way. But the portal stuff is just. I mean, yesterday I saw a couple of more pretty significant players go in the portal, guys who were good at the mid-major level. So there's going to be more action as we go on.